think it's important to say that the Myanmar elections are an important next step in a very long journey and evolution towards democracy in Myanmar. But unfortunately, this is a very imperfect next step, and it's riddled with flaws, and it's riddled with a lot of danger and a lot of mistakes that the incumbent government has made, and a lot more trepidation than really it should have been after 5 years of a so-called democratic government.
We all voted for the National League for Democracy in 2015. We were hoping that democracy would be advanced, freedom of speech, democracy, things that we cherish. But things have been quite contrary to what we expected. What we have here is a kind of trend transition from dictatorship to democracy, and at the same time, we're negotiating peace with the ethnic armed groups. Whether we will be able to connect all the dots in the next 5 years, 10 years, will be crucial, and the outcome of the election will decide where the country is headed.
Well, the likelihood of an NLD victory is high. I mean, the NLD will take the majority of seats in the parliament. It's Aung San Suu Kyi. She is Mother Sue to the population there. People are disappointed that things aren't moving forward faster, but when they're faced with a question of whether they want the military back or whether they want to continue on a democratic path, it's the NLD. The NLD is the only opposition to the military party that has power.
She remains very popular. All the polls have indicated that her popularity is way bigger than the popularity of her party or anybody else, any institution in the country. Her magic is still working wonderfully. She is a winning ticket. She and the party has been won. People are voting for the National League for Democracy because of her.
I think the most immediate problem with the elections is that it's being held in the midst of a surge in the coronavirus pandemic in Myanmar. The cases are well over 20,000. There have been nearly 900 deaths. The main commercial capital, Yangon, with its densely populated communities, is being asked to come to the polls while currently they're under stay-at-home lockdown orders. So the prospects for a real public health catastrophe in the midst of these elections is a clear and present danger, and one that the government does not seem too concerned about exacerbating by conducting the elections.
So the government is trying to enforce some very strict rules on electioneering. The candidates cannot speak to large gatherings. They can only have so many people in any one of their gatherings. They're having trouble enforcing those rules, and so the rate of infection is staying up. I think the big question is what's going to happen on Election Day, because they don't have mail-in voting, they don't have early voting, they have an Election Day, and it brings out a lot of people in long lines.
The next biggest issue to me is that there are unsolved armed conflicts around the country that are basically being ignored. In recent days, the Union Electoral Commission, the supposedly independent body, but it's far from independent, far from competent, has announced a whole raft of electoral cancellations because of the armed conflict, and has effectively disenfranchised more than 1 million ethnic Rakhine in Rakhine State. There's a real sense of frustration in Rakhine State, but also in other parts of the country where there's been partial cancellations. In Kachin and in Shan State, there's a lot of ethnic parties especially that are crying foul, that are saying that this is actually trying to marginalise some of their democratic aspirations here.
What dominates all elections in this country is the split between the democracy forces and the military. So people are going to vote based on whether they want to move forward with democracy or whether they support an authoritarian government. The Constitution calls for 25% of the members of the parliament to be appointed uniformed military. They don't even go to elections. Major articles in the Constitution that affect the structure of the political system cannot be changed without more than 75% of the parliament. So you have to have some uniformed military in the parliament voting in favor of the change in order to make it happen, and that hasn't worked. So they have an effective veto over any significant changes to the Constitution.
going forward, we want to see an inclusive government. We want to see a government that listens to different voices. We want to see a government that brings reconciliation in a gesture of goodwill towards the ethnic groups. We want to see a government that has a better relationship with the international community. We may or may not like the current government, but whatever government we have will be our government, and we have to work with them, going forward.